Mike Johnson, are you with us?
I am. How are you, sir?
I am very good. Thank you so much for accepting this assignment on such a short notice.
It's my pleasure.
I know this is a busy season for the wrestling journalism community. We have Elimination Chamber this Saturday night. We are on the road to WrestleMania. We are in the midst of WrestleMania season. For us in Buffalo, as I mentioned before you hopped on, we have Monday Night Raw coming to the KeyBank Center on Monday night, and we have a special appearance by Hulk Hogan on Monday afternoon. I am very excited about both. That's why I wanted to bring you on to this program here this evening.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. Obviously, it's the busiest time of the year for us here over at pwinsider.com, and we appreciate everybody's support and checking out the website. And it's always WrestleMania season is never boring, and this year already no exception. Obviously, with The Rock showing up and potentially throwing everything that looked to be meticulously planned into I guess shatters. We'll see. But obviously, the Raw in Buffalo is going to be a big show coming up after the elimination chamber on Saturday. Io Sky against Rhea Ripley and the Creed brothers challenging the War Raiders for the tag team title. So got two big title matches there for fans going to Keyspan. It's Buffalo's always been a pretty big historic market for wrestling, dating back to the Sheik and obviously ECW would go there, WWE would go there for many years, and I think the show this Monday is no exception for fans who are going to be attending.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you about something before we get into the business that is the WWE. Being involved in ECW back in the day, did you ever have the privilege, did you ever have the opportunity to come up here to the Flickinger Center to see a live ECW show?
I did, and unfortunately it was the show, I think it was titled The Buffalo Invasion. It was a show where poor Stevie Richards got his neck broken accidentally by Terry Funk when Terry hit him with a guardrail in the back of the neck. So I was there once, and I do remember, I have this vision of Tommy Dreamer like taking a crazy tumble down the bleachers. But yeah, I was there once, and it was pretty madcap and insane, and the fans in Buffalo are absolutely rabid for pro wrestling. They were then, and they are now.
Yeah, ECW, that was when I broke into on a lower level on independence in 1999, but ECW was really the impetus for me to get involved in professional wrestling. I was talking to Tracy Smothers off to the side of the bleachers, and then I met a gentleman that had a wrestling ring in Rochester, drove down the road a few times a week for 3 or 4 months, learned the basic fundamentals of pro wrestling, and then went on from there. But ECW had such an impact here in Buffalo, and I never missed a show. And knowing that you were involved, and I remember buying a program from Gabe Sapolsky, and just that whole grassroots thing that ECW had going on, it really fits so well here in Buffalo.
And it's crazy when you look at the old ECW, how many people came through there who went on to have some sort of run in pro wrestling, whether it was writers like myself who got a chance to find their way into the business and become reporters, or Gabe, who went from being the guy who sold programs and was Paul Heyman's assistant. Now he's going to be booking WWE Evolve when it debuts on Tubi on March 5th, just a couple of weeks from now, or even like people who were promoters on the independent level, and so many wrestlers who were inspired to get into wrestling because of ECW. Eddie Kingston has talked about that. Homicide has talked about that. The Amazing Red, Low Key. There were so many talents who came in and wanted to get into the business because of ECW and wanted to go to ECW. But by the time they made their way in, ECW unfortunately had filed for bankruptcy and disappeared into the night until the first reunion show. So they had to apply their trade elsewhere, and that ended up being Ring of Honor and TNA and places like that. And some of them made their way to WWE, others went to AEW, others stayed on the independent scene or went to Japan. But ECW really was like this lightning rod of a company that just inspired people to care about pro wrestling in a passionate way, to the point that it made them get into the business. I don't think we've seen anything like that since. Some people will point to AEW or Ring of Honor or TNA, but I don't think anything had that sort of like perfect zeitgeist moment like ECW when it was in its prime, and anybody who saw it at the Burt Flickinger Center knows that.
What was your motivation to get behind the scenes and go into journalism when it came to pro wrestling?
It was not planned. My plan was to work in the entertainment industry and hopefully find my way to Lucasfilm because I love Star Wars. And then I nearly died in a car wreck. So I was housebound, and I was always writing about wrestling for fun. And now I had far more time to do it. And it just happened to turn out that I worked on that to make money while I was recovering. And I never went back to my regular old job in the Hollywood industry because I was making money doing wrestling. And then PW Insider launched. And I said, you know what? I'll give myself a year to figure out if I can make this work. And within 3 months, it was working. And I never went back. And now it's been 21 years I've been a PW Insider. So it was not planned. And it's just one of those weird life lessons that the stuff that happens to you when you're trying to plan everything out, even though it might be awful in the moment, it might lead to a blessing later. And that's certainly what happened to me.
And what was the process when it came to launching PWInsider.com?
Wow. It was, we were very lucky because it happened overnight that we flipped the switch, and our former home at One Wrestling was actually kind enough to say, hey, Dave Scherer is leaving. These other gentlemen are leaving. I did not have the name personally that I would like to think I have now. And we had, within 24 hours, thousands of subscribers who were paying for our Elite section, which is our ad-free version of the site. And it was so busy that Dave Scherer, the patriarch and founder of the site, we didn't talk for a week because he was so busy processing subscriptions, and I was just working on content. And that it just we were very blessed and very lucky. I don't think we could replicate that today. And it just so happened that we had the fortuitous timing of the Tuesday after the Royal Rumble, we were live. So that Royal Rumble was leading into WrestleMania 20. It was a big year, and we just happened to catch the right attention at the right moment, and we've been doing it ever since, and we were very, very lucky.
We had Papa Russ from the Closed Fist on a couple weeks ago. He's a local wrestling journalist here in Buffalo, and I like the way he goes about doing things. I also like the way that PWInsider.com goes about doing things, being involved in wrestling once again at a very low level, but still being involved. I do tend to get burned out reading the same article over and over again. This person said this on a podcast. Now all of a sudden we're going to make a story about it. This person tweeted this out. This person liked this Facebook post. We're going to make an article out of it. One reason why I follow PW Insider on X, formerly known as Twitter, is because I love the way you guys lay out your news, the way everything is presented. You're obviously going to have your critics, your detractors about your free site. We don't need to go into that because I understand we're all here to make $1, and I'm not gonna talk about that because we all have to make $1 some way. And if that's the way you're going to do it, that's totally fine with me. Some other people might say different, but how do you approach the editorial side to make sure your news is relevant, easy to digest, and to make sure that you're hitting just the facts and you're not making a bunch of fiction stories?
All right. Well, there's no fiction on PW Insider. There's no fantasy stuff. It's all legitimate news. In regard to the free site, hey, anybody can say whatever they want, but they don't have to pay my mortgage. I do. And my boss directs how he wants the site to be, and I have to respect his decisions, and I do respect his decisions. And hey, if you don't like it, there's an ad-free version for a very small price that you could pay for every month and not have to worry about any advertising and get all sorts of additional bonuses, including additional material that we write and all sorts of podcasts that are exclusive for behind the paywall. As far as the editorial, I've always governed myself by this. As a fan, which I am first and foremost, and as someone who loves professional wrestling, what would I want to know? What would I want to read? What would I want to find out? And that's always kind of been my modus operandi when it comes to chasing news. Obviously, the WWE stuff is going to be the most important stuff. You mentioned things like tweets and Facebook likes. I'm never going to say, hey, we don't put up what people tweet, because sometimes what they tweet is newsworthy. But someone writing, hey, I went to some restaurant, I had a great meal, not really newsworthy in my eyes. We look for hard news. We look for stuff that's going on behind the scenes. We do deep analysis of what happens on the TV shows, deep discussion of what's going on in the world of professional wrestling on our podcast audios. And in terms of editorial, it's basically what would I want to know and what can we journalistically prove? If I hear something, hey, Pasquale's going to be here and this happened and he's in trouble because of X, but I cannot prove it by finding a second or even a third source, I'm not going to go with that story, because journalistically, we don't have a foundation to hold it up. And one of the things we do at PW Insider that I like to think that I'm very proud of is that we work very hard to make sure that everything that we write about can be journalistically proven. And if there is a rare occasion where we are wrong, we don't ignore it. We don't delete it. We will make a new article about it. We will explain where the mistake came from and why the parameters of the story were either incorrect or perhaps if we were talking about future plans, why they changed. Because WWE's live television, they could change things on a dime at any moment, the same way SNL could cut a sketch right before they go on the air. They're at the behest of whatever their timing is and what their producers from Paul Levesque on down want to do. And if they decide they've got a better idea on Monday night at 7:55, then what we reported at 5 o'clock in the afternoon is no longer valid and correct, but we have to cover and explain why there might have been those changes. So we do try to do what we can to double check every single thing that we put up. And given that we put up between 35 and 50 articles a day, there's a lot of work that goes into what we do.
All right, one more question for you before we go into modern day, and then I let you go because I know you're a very busy man. Mike Johnson wakes up on a Tuesday morning. What is Mike Johnson's day looking like from a reporting standpoint for the rest of the day, and how do you stagger your workload?
I have no idea how I stagger my workload. It's whatever I have to deal with in that moment. No day is the same. The only thing that I can tell you happens every single day is I brush my teeth and then I scroll through whatever text messages came through. I had my phone on airplane mode so I could try and get 6 to 8 hours of sleep. And then it's off to the races. It's making sure that whatever is scheduled for that Tuesday takes place, whether it's interviews or audios or TV previews. And then it's a lot of chasing stories. It's a lot of being on the phone. It's a lot of texting. Sometimes what you're chasing doesn't even pan out. You'll hear, hey, so-and-so got arrested, or hey, so-and-so is in trouble, or hey, so-and-so got hurt. And you might spend a couple of hours chasing the story to find out there's nothing to it. And then you've wasted this time when you've got other material that you're working on. But that's just the way the game works. Sometimes you run through the labyrinth and you hit a brick wall. You don't find the exit on the other end. A lot of it is trying to keep up with sources and making sure that sources are giving you correct information and not that they're telling you something that they might want you to put out there because maybe they don't like the person they're talking about, or maybe there's a little bit of pro wrestling heat, which is kind of like, for those who don't know, that's like an inner lingo for someone's in trouble, but we don't want to tell you why. But hint, hint, nudge, nudge, they're in trouble for some reason. Or maybe it's just, you're chasing down a story, you're hearing there's a celebrity involvement. Maybe you're hearing about there's plans being made. Like we were lucky enough in the last couple of years, we broke that the CW network signed a deal to bring NXT. We broke that the Royal Rumble was going to Saudi Arabia. We broke that New Orleans was the front runner to WrestleMania 42 weeks before The Rock went on Raw and announced it. So sometimes it's just a matter of tracking down sourcing on stories and making sure you've got the right information. There's a lot of doing interviews. There's a lot of talking to people on the phone. There's a lot of trying to get some of these companies to give you a statement or to acknowledge that what you're hearing is correct, when sometimes they don't even want you to be reporting about these things. And there's a big tug of war with all these companies. And it's not like there's an evil versus a good here, but sometimes the people that you're dealing with on the PR side, they are trying to protect their company, and their goal is to protect the company from what you're trying to write about. So there's sort of this tug of war back and forth, and sometimes at some point you got to go with your gut, and especially when it's a big story, I always say it's like jumping off a cliff and hoping your parachute works, because if you're wrong, especially in the internet age, it's going to be a lot of shaming and a lot of people jumping on you because you're incorrect. But you got to be able to prove what you're writing. You got to be able to have the foundation and the sourcing. And luckily, we've had a pretty good track record over 21 years plus.
And you're honest, and I like that a lot. Last question before we get you out of here. In your own personal opinion, as a journalist and as a wrestling fan, what is the biggest factor currently contributing to the WWE's overall success?
It is that an audience grew up and left and returned because John Cena came back and Cody Rhodes came back and CM Punk came back, and they grew up, and all these people who were kids now have money to spend because they're in their 20s. And it is, and I do not think anybody should ever underestimate this, Cody Rhodes has captured the imagination of an entire generation of children the way that Hulk Hogan captured fans in the 80s and Steve Austin captured fans in the 90s. There are literally, my nephew went to a Cody Rhodes birthday party last weekend. Wow. for his friend Logan, who is turning 7, I believe. And the theme of the party was Cody Rhodes. I saw pictures. The whole thing is Cody Rhodes. There is a legitimacy to Cody Rhodes the way that fans loved Bret Hart as a legitimate athlete, the way the fans a generation ago loved CM Punk as a legitimate athlete. They believe Cody is an honest, legitimate person as much as an on-screen character, and I don't think that can be underrated. I also think the storyline of the Bloodline being this very long-term, played-out story has helped wrestling fans and WWE fans become sort of trained and expect something more than just their average pro wrestling storytelling that they received under the previous ownership. And I think a lot of it has to do with Endeavor owning the company, because they have found ways to squeeze blood out of every single stone and find new ways to get revenue. And let's face it, they made those ticket prices go way up. So I think all those factors play into the WWE success, but I think the biggest part of it is that they found a brand new audience to tap into. Part of it was an audience that might have been lapsed and disenfranchised because of the way old characters were treated, came back and found that, hey, I like the way these talents are being used now. And they tapped into a new audience of families who fell in love with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins and talents like that. And to the audience today, those wrestlers or those characters, those performers, however you want to look at them, however you want to describe them, they mean as much to those fans today who are growing up watching that content as a Shawn Michaels, a Bret Hart, a DX, a Steve Austin, a Rock, a Hulk Hogan, a Roddy Piper meant to the people in the previous generations. And once someone's in love with something, you can't tell them it's not good. You can't tell them they're not to love it. And once that's in your DNA, it's something you're going to love for your entire life. And WWE right now they've hit the zeitgeist, and they've been able to make people fall in love with different aspects of their company. Not everybody likes WWE for the same reason, but they all love WWE. And I still would argue maybe they were hotter in the Attitude Era in terms of public perception, but in terms of the appeal of the overall show and the quality of the overall show and the want for tickets, I think that may be hotter now. But in terms of the pop culture crossover, I think Austin and Rock and Foley and DX and guys like that might have been a little bit hotter in terms of the pop culture aspect, but I don't think today's WWE is very far behind what the Attitude Era was.
I feel like you just hit the nail right on the head. So if people want to find out more about pwinsider.com, they want to become a member, and what should they be on the lookout for the next weeks and months leading up to WrestleMania?
We are going to do everything we can to cover the behind-the-scenes aspect of WrestleMania, perhaps have some interviews with WWE talents. I'll be on hand in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks, and we're doing a bunch of interviews with a lot of other talents from other companies and other promotions, and we are even going to be having some people from the Queen of the Ring film up on the site in the next couple of weeks, and also some other people from the Hollywood industry, because we're going to be talking to some Hollywood people about the crossover between pro wrestling and stunt work, and that's something I've been working on. I'm looking forward to having some folks on there, and people can check us out at pwinsider.com or pwinsiderelite.com, which is our ad-free subscription service.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate you joining me here tonight, and I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here on WEBR in Buffalo.
Anything for a friend of HC Loke, sir, and anytime you need me again, let me know, and I'm happy to come back, and I thank everyone in Buffalo for listening, and hopefully you check us out. We appreciate your support.
I appreciate it. You take care, sir.